So next, we have a panel about the challenges and opportunities of sustainable aviation fuel, and I'm delighted to welcome Matt Gorman, Director of Carbon Strategy at Heathrow Airport, to moderate the panel. We'll look at some of the outcomes of CAAF3 that we heard about, and the challenges of SAF production and scale-up, and feedstock availability over the coming years, as well as airline commitments. So Matt, please come up on stage with your panel.
Brilliant. Well, good morning, everyone. It is great to be here. I've had very strict instructions from Haldane. I can see a big red 45 minutes, which is starting to count down. I'm not allowed to read anyone's biogs. You can see their names on the screen. All the details are on the website. I can tell you it's an excellent panel of experts on SAF, so they need no introduction, I'm going to say, to begin with. I'm just going to say a couple of brief words to frame. The panel session is, to quote the agenda, looking at the outcomes of CAAF3, the challenges of production scale-up and feedstock availability over the coming years, and airline commitments to demand-side measures. So that's what I'm going to steer you through this morning. I wanted to start with three messages, very high-level messages to frame us on SAF. The first one is that SAF is really the key to taking the carbon out of flying by 2050. And just to underline that, on the screen you can see transition pathways published by ATAG, IATA, ICAO, ICCT, MPP, many acronyms, but that's effectively the global government through ICAO, a series of industry and indeed NGO and think tank roadmaps, SAF, anywhere up to 70% of the solution by 2050. So it's key. Second message, we can do it. And you'll hear later from today, Virgin talking about their 100%, landmark 100% transatlantic SAF flight last week. I was talking to Rolls earlier, all of whose engines are now able to fly on 100% SAF, Boeing targeting that by 2030 for all of their production aircraft, 100% SAF. Thirdly, then, the challenge really is taking action. And I like the focus at COP on taking action. I was seeing some of the posters today. Action inspires hope, belief, trust. The industry is taking action. 50%. Airlines representing 40% of global air traffic have committed to at least 5% SAF use, actually some up to 10 or even 30% by 2030. We need governments to take action to send the market signals to scale SAF alongside industry. Brilliant to see that 40 countries are discussing or implementing measures. And the CAAF agreement we've already touched on, again, a landmark step with 5% reduction in carbon intensity by 2030, an important step forward. So that's just a bit of a framer for us. I'm going to open with a question for each of the panel. It's going to be in two parts, and I'm going to ask the panel to speak for no more than 2 minutes as the clock counts down, just to frame this. I know if I set it at 2 minutes, people won't go too far beyond that, he said, looking at the panel. The first two questions then, what are your views on the outcome of CAAF3? Part one, and part two, if you had to pull out one challenge now for the scale up of SAF, what would it be and how would you address it? And I'll then look to theme a conversation around policy, feedstock and airline commitments as we go. I don't think we've got Slido for questions. I'll try, if at all possible, to weave in audience questions. So if you really want to engage or feedback, just the person who waves the most will basically get asked for a question, I think, is the process. I don't think there's a particular order to the panel, so I'm just going to swing along to begin with. So, what are your views on the outcome of CAAF3? And if you had to pull out one challenge now for the scale-up of SAF, what would it be? And we're going to start with Munir, co-founder and director of SAF1. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I think we clearly welcome the outcome of the CAAF3 announcement, 5% reduction intensity by 2030. We would have expected something a little bit higher, in line with some of the self-imposed targets that we've seen in Europe, for example, and other cargo airlines. I think we've seen a chart a bit earlier. So, but obviously very clear. And what's also been evident is that production is going to be required in every jurisdiction, really globally. So we know that 90% of oil and gas production is in 22 countries today. There's a great opportunity for SAF here to be really much more decentralized. And in terms of your second question, I mean, from my perspective, the key challenge, other than cost and obviously supply, is how do we get the world to move at the same pace in terms of meeting those targets. And again, going back to the decentralized approach, I think that's going to be key, and that's our strategy at SAF One, is to really go very local when it comes to SAF production, capturing local feedstock, stimulating a local economy, creating local jobs again, and again achieving energy security.
Brilliant, thank you. That was a model bit of timekeeping. If we can pass the mic to Jen from Rolls-Royce.
Yeah, so from a Rolls-Royce perspective, we think the CAAF 3 outcome shows really good momentum, carrying on from the long-term aspirational goal. We're really pleased to see the 5% global average. Of course, we would love to have seen more. I think we always want more, right? But we really welcome the fact that it's accompanied with that global framework as well, to show how do we make sure that all the states can kind of progress as quickly as they can. So that support for the knowledge transfer, the technology transfer, we think is really important, along with that kind of 5% target. I think similar to other challenges, we've shown that the technology is not a barrier to the uptake of SAF. We can see that really it comes from the supply side for us in terms of scaling up that production. And we've also seen on the charts that there's lots of different feedstocks that we could use. So really what we'd like to see is support for some of the less mature feedstocks. So maybe some of the power to liquid, where actually we're going to need not just the kind of direct fuel, but it's that energy that you need to support it. So your low cost, low carbon electricity, that kind of thing, to really progress that scale up of SAF.
Brilliant, thank you, Jen.
Thanks, Matt. I just wanted to start by thanking Haldane Dodd. I think about the last at least maybe 2 months, Haldane's work in Montreal leading up to the CAAF 3 conference, and I think he's been here for maybe 3.5 weeks straight. So Haldane, can we just give Haldane a thank you? I would say the outlook for me at Boeing, and I think the policy element is so important. I almost applaud the policy framework that came out of CAAF 3 as much as the quantitative target on emissions reduction. I think this idea of policy being the great unlock between aviation and finance and the energy industry is critical. And I think some of the things that we started to outline there about what good policy looks like if we really want to spur this industry forward now and build on the momentum were critical. I think the SAF accounting idea and how we form that so that it becomes trusted between fuel producers and fuel consumers is going to be critical. So that would be what I thought was just a great advance, a great global advance. SAF is the answer, and now we have to work the policy side of this and get the emission reduction, that we're after. So that's what I would say. And I would say the challenge, and Miriam hit on it today, I think the challenge but the great opportunity is aviation and energy need to work together on this. And by energy, I mean small, dedicated, focused SAF companies and the large oil and gas companies. We're going to need it all, and we have to take advantage of mature infrastructure to get to these carbon-reducing fuels sooner.
Good morning. And my sincere thanks to Haldane and the entire ATAG team for pulling together what I believe is a very appropriate conversation in a forum at COP28 around the role of a hard-to-abate industry like aviation. So United, we're thrilled to be here today. We have long pledged our commitment to net zero by 2050 without relying on the use of carbon offsets, which is fundamentally rooted in the need for sustainable aviation fuels. And what we believe is the outcome of the CAAF discussion just 2 weeks ago is really a declaration and almost a shift, or maybe an expanded aperture, I'll say, from recognizing in a global policy framework. We started with carbon credits, now we're moving to sustainable aviation fuel. The message is super clear to the market. We are shifting towards the adoption of lower carbon fuels, and that's the right solution within aviation. So it's really been fascinating to watch this evolution, and I do believe that the commitment made under ICAO is really sort of a double click into that theme of we are shifting, we are learning the science, we understand our industry, and we're focusing on reductions within the operations of aviation. If I were to identify what I think is the biggest challenge, it's clearly pace. We're not moving fast enough, and I think we've seen that from every presenter so far. For me, I believe that the single biggest challenge within that is the financing disconnect. We're seeing some desire to put dollars behind venture startups. We're seeing some 10 million gallon plants. United needs 4 billion gallons. We are a single operator. You can look worldwide to sort of determine how much fuel we're going to need on the course to net zero by 2050. There simply is not enough right now. And so that's part policy, that's part bringing capital to markets, that's really about shifting behaviors and driving the kind of change that we need in the schedule that we're committing to now by 2030, decade end.
Thank you. So being the last one is very difficult to be creative at this moment, but well, I agree with my colleagues here. Also, I want to thank the organizers, ATAG and the COP28, of course, for this invitation. So I represent the IAG group. I'm from Iberia. We were the first group of airlines to commit to the net zero emissions target in 2050 and also to the 10% target of SAF in 2030. So that sends a clear message that for us and for all the industry, of course, is critical to, as you said, I guess the word is pace, and we need to really keep this moving forward and being more ambitious as possible, because this is the key to the health and the existence of aviation. Cannot be other way than being sustainable. There's no other way, as everyone here agrees. So for us, the CAAF is excellent, is a step moving forward. We need to everyone be involved in this from a national, regional, international level. So this is critical for the industry, and as a challenge as well, I think financing, price of SAF, and alliances, I would say. We need to get the governments, the incentives and the help to invest for the financing of the SAF, because it's too expensive at this point, and we really want to use as much SAF as possible, but needs to be more in quantity and a better price, of course.
Brilliant, thank you. That's a great framer for the discussion. So the three themes I suggested we focus on were around policy, feedstock, and airline commitments. Let me just start with the policy piece, and maybe if I could start with a question to Lauren and to Chris, both from the US. So I think certainly speaking from a UK perspective, we have looked quite enviously at the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the tax breaks for sustainable fuel. We've certainly played that back into the UK debate to say, you know, look what's happening. America's attracting the investment. What I'd be interested in a couple of things. Firstly, your view on is it as rosy as we see it from the other side of the Atlantic? And what do you see as the kind of blend between carrots in terms of those incentives and sticks in terms of mandates? And I'll come to others on the panel on the same theme.
So thanks for the question. I think it's a really important one. I'm really quite thrilled with the leadership we've seen from the administration in the United States. They have sort of put the gauntlet down and said that the transition is happening in every sector in the United States, and aviation included. We are thrilled that we have this tax credit for sustainable aviation fuels. It's the first time we have an aviation tax credit to support our transition to low carbon flying. In addition to that, we have a broader clean fuels production credit that follows. Both of those credits, what I think is noteworthy and where I think the United States really got it right, is that it's performance focused, meaning you get more money the greater the reduction in the carbon emissions associated with your SAF pathway. Those are the kinds of indicators that we actually do need to bring to market, because we're not picking winners or losers of SAF types. We're actually focusing on the outcome and incentivizing the market to really continue to innovate and find those pathways that can achieve the greatest reductions in the most economical way. I will say one of the areas that we need some improvement, and we're very busy and heads down trying to facilitate this conversation with many of you in this room with the US government, is the duration and the amount. The Sustainable Aviation Fuel Credit is only a 2-year credit. We're halfway through that term. We don't have guidance. It's not implemented. It's kind of a nightmare. But we're working on extending that timeline so that we can have a longer signal to the market and the investor community to say, these credits are here to stay. They're bankable against some of the investments that you're looking to make, and we stand by it as a US government. And then hopefully the clean fuels production can kick in afterward. Before I turn it to Chris, I will also note that we have seen a tremendous amount of innovation come to market because of these incentives. United looked at some of these pathways, but 18, 24 months ago, they did not make sense. We could not make the numbers work. And so we sort of stood back and said, we're going to take a wait and see. Well, since then, we've launched an entire venture fund focused on SAF production alone with 13 other investors worldwide that have helped us really start looking at putting dollars towards some of these startup technologies, because with those incentives, the numbers do work. And we see a viable marketplace, and we really want to kickstart some of those technologies. And so I'll turn it over now to one of the investors in our fund, Boeing.
Thanks, Lauren. I guess I want to start where Annie mentioned this morning, the communication aspect of this. When we're in our aviation bubble, I think it's one thing, but when we're out engaging cross-sectorally, we have to talk a little bit differently when we engage feedstock providers or banks or energy companies. And I think one of the things I appreciated about the SAF Blenders tax credit was it sought to be technology and feedstock agnostic. And I think now what's happening as it gets driven into the tax code, that is the discussion of what kind of models are going to be used to calculate the life cycle carbon improvements so that these things qualify for the tax credits. It's not an easy issue. And the people that make ethanol, for example, want to be covered in the tax credits. And so this is where the policy gets hard, but the intent of trying to be agnostic on the technology pathways and the feedstock innovation that's occurring is very important. And I agree with Lauren. I worry a little that when we're out talking about SAF, everybody sort of thinks of it as this one thing. It's this one thing made out of, I heard chip fat or cooking oil the other day. It's this one thing, it's oils with the HEFA process. And the fact is there is tremendous innovation going on right now in feedstocks. I happen to visit with my alma mater, University of Illinois. It's an agricultural land-granted school. They're genetically re-engineering land cover crops that will require very little water and have higher lipid yield, all for the days where we're going to make cleaner fuels. So the innovation occurring in the space is fantastic, and I think we want to encourage that wherever we can.
Thank you, Chris.
From a European perspective, we are very happy with the 20 million allowances to cover the gap between the jet fuel and the SAF price. But we are worried that, or concerned that we will need more allowances really in the future. And also, we are kind of jealous with the IRA because we think that sends a stronger message. And in fact, the investment is going towards the US. And we conducted a study here in Spain about what in numbers, what this new industry will represent in Spain in terms of social and territorial cohesion. And it was astonishing. It was incredible, and it's a great opportunity to have the producers stay local and create this new industry. So, sorry, we don't want the investment to go to the US. We want this to be everywhere, and in Spain too.
Thank you, Teresa. No, it's interesting. It's a kind of it felt like the US started, if you had a spectrum from carrots to sticks, the US started very much with the carrot approach. Europe was more sticks through the mandate, but has started to introduce some more carrots through some of the allowances. But I think your point around this being an opportunity around the world for domestic production, energy security and jobs is absolutely right. Munir, just on that topic, you talked about decentralisation. Was that interested in exploring that a bit more? Is that a nod to the role of national policies in particular in scaling this? Perhaps if you could talk about that. And then this point on it's not just one feedstock, as Chris said, it's a whole variety.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, absolutely. I think just on the IRA, our perspective is clear. It's stimulated a lot of investment, especially on the technology side. But to Lauren's point, it has limitation. It's expiring in 27. If there's a change of administration in the US, what is the certainty? And us as investors in the space and developers, we want revenue certainty, right? Long-term revenue certainty. And I think this is where the government needs to play a role. So I think ideally we want to see the mandates, but we want to see also revenue certainty on the long term to be able to invest, because these are long duration assets, long payback time. And yeah, there will be different technologies, different level of capex. So we really need to do that. And then we need to see, frankly, the other big aviation hubs follow through as well. We need the Gulf, and we're hearing some mandates that might be coming up as well on the horizon. So that's very positive. We need China. We need Southeast Asia. Those are big aviation hubs, and they need to also be putting the right policies in place for again to be able to get to the production targets. I think I just want to end on the looking at, again, on the policy side, the IMF came up with some numbers on the fossil fuel subsidies that we have currently. And we're talking about $1.3 trillion of current subsidies that go into fossil fuel again. That is the amount of capex required to fund the entire SAF industry for the next few years. So again, we want to see those phase out. Again, moreover, I think this is the explicit subsidy, but if you factor in the implicit subsidies, the collateral damage that this has, we're talking about $5 to $10 trillion. So again, putting things into perspective, the money can follow if we just rechannel those resources accordingly.
Brilliant, thank you. And Jen, just on this whole question of feedstock and different production routes, are there views, technology considerations from roles in terms of the different production pathways for SAF, or are you largely agnostic, anything can work with your engines?
Yeah, so at the moment, obviously, anything can work in terms of the feedstocks. So with the drop in SAF, obviously, it meets that Jet A specification. The engine essentially can't tell the difference between whether it's been produced sustainably or whether it's conventional jet fuel. So from that perspective, we don't really have any concerns. We obviously want to make sure that any of the fuels that we do use meet that criteria that CORSIA sets in terms of being truly sustainable. So when we look at things like the biofuels, we want to make sure that it doesn't compete with food crops, it doesn't compete with feed crops, water usage, all of that kind of thing. But we really see a place, and you can see it in the charts that we were shown earlier, that both biofuel and the synthetic fuel both have a part to play. Both will be needed to support aviation to be net zero by 2050. So we really do encourage all the pathways because we can't get all the fuel we need from one alone.
Which is a great lead into the next theme I was going to suggest we tackle, which was around feedstock, actually. So, and it would be great to get everyone's perspectives on this. So obviously lots of debate around the world in different countries on, is there sufficient sustainable biomass for aviation? Does aviation need to be prioritised? How quickly can we scale up power to liquids? So perhaps if we could do another swing along the panel on that point. So, is there enough sustainable biomass available globally? Part one, and part two, how quickly can we scale alternatives like PTL, e-fuel, synthetics? Chris, can we turn to you next?
I think a lot of the studies we've seen, whether it's through Clean Skies for Tomorrow or ICAO's analyses or ATAG's analyses, suggest there will be enough feedstocks. It won't be all one pathway, and it may be geographically dependent. I think there's a lot of roadmaps. I know Australia recently released one with their national science agency, CSIRO. These road mapping ideas of what elements of the supply chain are available in a region Is it feedstock? Is it renewable electricity? Is it green produced hydrogen? And by the way, renewable electricity and green produced hydrogen would make any SAF pathway cleaner, even before we get all the way over here to PTL. And I think PTL would be a great way to deal with this in the future, because that would mean we'd have an abundance of renewable electricity. I mean, think about it. If we had that much renewable electricity, that we could direct air carbon capture, we could green electrolyze hydrogen, and then we could add more renewable electricity to make a fuel. That would be a lot of renewable electricity. And those renewable electricities, as they come online, or the green hydrogen, would also help the other SAF pathways. So I don't think it's a matter of throwing out earlier feedstock solutions necessarily as we move towards PTL in some regions of the world, and I think we're going to need it all. And so we should encourage those different pathways and supply chains to take root wherever they can. And then I think we need that global accounting system that's trusted by producers and consumers.
Brilliant, thank you.
May I? So yes, I totally agree. We need all the technologies, we need all the feedstock. In a first moment, in this same study I just mentioned, there's a first moment in which, of course, all the residues from the waste from forest and oils, etc., agriculture will be needed. In Spain, we know that we not only will have enough for us, but we will be able to export these waste as well if we wanted, if this industry was created in Spain. But in a second moment, everything will move towards PTL, and it will make sense economically in the future. So it's a wonderful technology, because you can even get negative emissions. So that's the future, and we should all aim at producing SAF with that.
Lauren, enough feedstock, role of PTL?
Well, you know, I think we're going to be fine. I mean, my goodness, we're going to be fine. There's a lot of drama about this, but what makes me an optimist, and my team's probably rolling their eyes right now because I tell this story all the time. We invested in this company called Cemvita, and this is just one example of what has potential to unlock over the next couple of years. This company is literally creating, they found this this bug, this microbe that eats CO2 and creates a high-yielding lipid. So if you think about, yes, this is like a Pac-Man that chomps on carbon, I don't know where Rohini is, and turns it into a high-yielding lipid. This hasn't come to market yet, but it's a way that we can actually open up the scale of fats, oils, and greases in a capacity that we have not yet unlocked yet. Of course, there's the next generation, which is really about biomass. In the United States, we've got a tremendous amount of ethanol that is under production and currently under production, and we've got a sector that is shifting away from that, so there's opportunity there. Couldn't agree more with the comments about power to liquid. We've got dependencies there about a robust, abundant power sector that is greened. So we look forward to the day that happens. But I do think that there's a lot of focus on the innovation to drive scalable and sustainable feedstocks. And that's really crucial, is that we make sure we have the criteria locked in, we have transparency around that, we can track all of the usage of that feedstock in a way that demonstrates that we're actually pulling down emissions in the industry.
Brilliant, thank you. Love the idea of a Pac-Man chomping on, I forgot, what was it chomping on? Carbon. Excellent. Carbon. Very good. Jen, anything to add on feedstocks? You touched on this a bit.
Yeah, I think just to add that we've done quite a lot of work with the Cambridge Aviation Impact Accelerator, and that suggests that we can cover about 40 to 50% with biofuels. And then we've also done some work looking at kind of the hydrogen availability and how much low-cost, low-carbon electricity you need. And we're looking at sort of around, you need to increase your grid capacity by about 10% to support aviation, which is kind of in line with what a lot of the other groups like IEA and things kind of model. So we definitely think it's doable. I think, to echo Lauren's point, definitely very optimistic that it's more than doable for us, and we're not going to compete with anything that we wouldn't want to compete with for that energy or for that fuel.
Brilliant. Munir.
Yeah, just I think we've covered a lot here, but I think just to add a few comments on I mean, the studies we've seen is anywhere between 50 to 100% in terms of how much availability of biomass. I mean, we're at less than 1%, so we have a long way to go before we can start worrying about that. That's one. And then what we're seeing is the again, with the penetration of electric vehicles, we're seeing a shift of the biodiesel industry into HEFA, and that's again capacity that was not available a few years ago. That is going to become more and more available. So that's on HEFA, and again on the other promising pathways, whether we're pathway agnostic. So, and again, in order to scale up, we'll have to play in every pathway progressively as the technology readiness level of each pathway gets higher. On the municipal solid waste, for example, we're doing a lot of work there. There's 1 kilogram of waste per person on this planet. I mean, there's plenty of waste around. So again, as soon as we nail down the gasification technology, I think we're going to see a lot of activity there. On the power to liquid, that's an interesting one. I think very relevant for this part of the world is. It's going to be a real function of the cost and price of green hydrogen. I think with some of the lower cost of solar, I think UAE has now the lower levelized cost of energy when it comes to solar. I think there's obviously plenty of space. So that's going to be a very promising avenue for the UAE, and we're quite excited about that.
Brilliant. The piece on green electricity is fascinating. Just as a quick sidebar, we did, in our latest UK aviation transition pathway published earlier this year, we looked at the total electricity requirements, some order of magnitude estimates for SAF, for hydrogen, for carbon capture, putting those together for PTL. And it was up to 20% of the UK's electricity requirements by 2050. And when I first saw that figure, it was an eye-opener. But actually, if you look at some of the work done by the Mission Possible platform, I think Faustine is speaking later, maybe here, they'd concluded up to 10% globally. And actually, the thought process I went through was, actually, isn't that quite a positive story that we know how to do green electricity. Yep, we absolutely need lots more of it, but look at some of the commitments emerging here. And if the unlock for aviation is fundamentally around green electricity, that is, let's take action and make it happen, as the COP focus says. Just before I go on to the last topic, any questions people in the audience want to ask? Any comments on what you've heard so far? Don't feel you need to, but I want to give the opportunity. We've got one in the front row. So I need to come with a microphone, that probably means, yes.
I can enunciate.
Very good, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karina. I run an aviation circularity venture. But my question is actually on the financing need that you've all asked. So my background is in impact investing and blended finance deployment. I was invited here at COP to support the development of new supply chain decarbonization funding models. So I'm interested to hear from all of you, what's missing? Right, like I'm someone, I can bring whoever you need at that table. We can sell you all very, very well. What's missing? Why isn't financing at the table? How do you want to create that conversation?
So, Chris, you talked about Munir, go on.
No,
you talked about the finance as as unlocked by policy as well. Munir, go.
As I said earlier, I think we are looking for revenue certainty, especially on the early technologies. Mandates are important. Again, we need a global playing field as we go into this decentralized approach of building maybe smaller scale HEFA plant to start with. That's the fastest way to get there, and we believe the most sustainable way. And that is a de-risk approach. The technology is ready. It's been proven. So those projects are already bankable, and those are already billions of dollars that. On the demand side, airlines will buy anything that you can produce today, right? So that is already ready, and we just need the policies to be in place. On the other technologies, they'll come later. Again, it's going to be a matter of time, but we will need also some support on, getting those technologies at the TRL level, which is bankable and financeable. So revenue certainty is key in my view.
I think I'd agree with the revenue certainty thing from a producer's point of view that favor a mandate. I think the key thing is if you're a CapEx provider, then you want some certainty on the duration of the project, and it depends on who you're working with. And I think one of our challenges is we have all these small innovators, but maybe they're not yet bankable credit. And so then it almost attracts venture funding, which has these high expectations of return in 5 to 7 years. It's not good for project finance. So I think that that's where the policy, I keep thinking this policy unlock, that round table that has a bank, a fuel producer, an aviation provider, and a policymaker, and finding that policy that de-risks the CapEx flowing into these projects is really critical. And I think that's true whether you're a small focused startup or you're a big oil and gas provider.
Yeah, and I'll just add that the inertia we're seeing is not the initial funding. So venture, demonstration phase, even that's happening. It's getting to the $1 billion plan investment and taking it to commercialization. That's not happening. That's sort of the valley. But I will also say there's a disconnect that's happening with the financial markets around expectations of this bankability because, it's very unorthodox for an airline to sign up for a 20-year fixed term offtake agreement in any capacity for fuel. And there's sort of this desire by producers that are rightfully taking risk, but that's not how we purchase. And so we haven't yet found a common ground to navigate that desire for certainty on the one side from the investor and sort of the purchase behaviors of a traditional commercial operator. And I think once we sort of address that disconnect and find a way to make both parties satisfied in that equation, we'll see a lot more investment happening.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually, and I was pleased to hear your words, Munir, revenue certainty, which certainly with my UK hat on, we're focusing a lot with the government on precisely to help unlock investment, and that's such a clear message coming through from investors. And it's, good to hear it's a global message. Just building on, one more question, brilliant. Right, I'm going to do my microphone job. Since I asked for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. Dina Kamel, I'm a reporter from The National. We're a UAE-based newspaper. So I just wanted to take a moment to connect this room of esteemed experts from the aviation industry with some of the conversations that are happening outside this room at COP. So we're hearing a lot of calls and urgent call to action from climate envoys, climate activists who are asking for the aviation industry to be given an additional tax on their carbon emissions, to be held responsible for their emissions, while others are even saying the aviation industry has a responsibility to contribute to the loss and damage fund that's been newly created here at COP. Can I get some of your thoughts and commentary on what is the responsibility of the aviation industry within that context? And is that the right way to reduce carbon emissions, to incentivize better ways, greener ways of flying? Thank you.
Perhaps I can...
Go for it.
Well, it's a very difficult question. Do you hear me? Yes. So, but I understand. We have to understand and be mindful of everyone's opinions and perspectives. But aviation represents around 2-3% of global total emissions, which doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility. And another thing, to be honest, is that aviation, even though it represents that small percentage, it's only around 10% of humanity flies. So it's a question, I guess, because sometimes I wonder why the focus into aviation so much, because there are so many other sectors that contribute as much or even much more. And I guess it's because of this problem of climate or that only this 10% of people that fly. So it's inequality in reality. But so people need to understand that aviation is critical as well for the well-being of many countries, even vulnerable ones that depend on tourism. So it's not just people that want to have fun that travel. It's a matter of well-being and important things. They create aviation creates jobs, create wealth, and so many good things. Even it's critical for humanitarian purposes. So we are the ones most interested in moving towards sustainability. We want SAF. This is why SAF is so critical to us, because it's moving from fossil fuels to another sustainable way of transportation. But we need help. This is not just us doing this effort. Well, I'll stop it there.
If I could just offer, I totally appreciate the intent of the question, because it's really about wanting to see progress right now. And frankly, if I was queen for a day, I think we should tax carbon. I think there should be some kind of price on carbon. I do. But that's not for me to decide. So now we're trying to figure out what are these other workarounds and how do we actually demonstrate that there's a cost to what we're putting into the environment. I think we are in a bit of a conundrum as a hard-to-abate industry, in that if you're looking for progress today, you are going to ask us to take on behaviors and decisions that really are fundamentally not in the best interest of the industry. And what I mean by that is the only way you can really show progress right now is by going out and buying carbon credits, which is fine. You can go buy carbon credits, but that doesn't make me, as a leader in the aviation industry, change my decisions, select alternatives, modify my behavior. I don't do anything differently. And that's not the behaviors that we're trying to really encourage within the industry. And so we are asking for an element of patience to say, let us build this marketplace, frankly, for a product that does not exist right now. Let us facilitate the start of a transition for aviation, and let us do this right. And that is fundamentally what we're all in this room trying to solve for today. And I do think that that has got to be the commitment that we lead with, because we don't want to have a temporary Band-Aid solution to this challenge. We really need a permanent fix by reducing the emissions within sector.
Great contribution. Thank you, Lauren. Just having thought we had loads of time, clearly we're now at 4 minutes, so we haven't got a huge amount of time to finish. But the final area that was in the plan for the session was just briefly looking at airline commitments to demand-side measures. So, Lauren, you were just talking about the challenge for airlines committing to long-term offtakes, given some of the costs. Just interested, what further actions can airlines take to stimulate demand? And within that, what's the kind of conversation you're having with your consumers, with travelers, either individually or with corporates? Is there an interest, even if it involves paying more? Can you kind of harness that to send a demand signal?
So I'll tell you, our customers have been really some of our most strategic partners in our transition so far. We have a program called EcoSkies Alliance, which is about 40 corporates right now. It continues to grow, that help us finance that premium. And as you all know, at least in the US, it's 2 to 4 times the cost. In Europe, it's different. Without their partnership, I'm not sure how much we would be able to afford the purchase of sustainable aviation fuel on our own, given how low margin we are as an industry. The other point that I'll also make is that this year, we introduced into our booking path the ability, both the emissions per flight, but then also the ability for the average consumer, the average traveler, to contribute to United Sustainable Flight Fund, so investing in the future of sustainable flight. It has been remarkable, given our history with carbon offsets and sort of the very low adoption that we saw historically there, moving towards, hey, invest in SAF. This is a new market. We need your help. Be a part of the change. Understand the solution that's the right solution for aviation. We've seen a tremendous engagement from our leisure travelers in wanting to participate. It's a low dollar sign, so it's anywhere from $1 to $7, so not a high contribution, but it's really about sort of bringing a movement forward, engaging our leisure travelers. My understanding, at least from watching sort of the behaviors of our consumers, is that they are far more sophisticated. Our messaging around sustainable aviation fuels is working, and they want to back the right solutions. And so I applaud everyone in in this room because all of our collective efforts are starting to work on what is actually a very sort of sciencey and complicated message we're starting to penetrate. So kudos to everyone here.
Brilliant. And that's a great note to end on as we count down the last couple of minutes. We always like an on-time arrival at Heathrow. Good aviation joke to finish on there, so I will finish on time. Thank you to the panel. I think you've heard a great set of insights and action being taken across the value chain on sustainable aviation fuel. It's the key solution to take the carbon out of flying. We can absolutely do it, but collectively we have to take action. It's the first time I think I've heard the word greenium today, which I like, so I'm going to start using that. There is a green premium, but with the right policies as well as action by the industry, we can unlock the policy unlock, as you put it, Chris, and get finance in. So on that note, I'll close actually a minute early, which I know Haldane will thank me for. Thank you.